Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a new episode of Iblis Manifestations podcast. On this week's episode, it is my absolute honor and privilege to have none other than my friend Kyle, aka Naas Alcameth, from the renowned black metal bands Akhlys, Nightbringer, Aoratos and Bestia Arcana on the show. This, by far, I would say, was probably the darkest, deepest plunge that we've ever had on any of the conversations on the show thus far. We also discussed some of the recent allegations that Akhlys have been dealing with, as well as Naas himself. And we also took a deep dive into the esoteric and the dreams and sleep paralysis and demons and the possession and everything that I'm sure you guys will be thrilled to hear on this podcast. Before we continue, as always, I just wanted to say thank you all for paying attention to Iblis Manifestations, for consuming the podcast, for sharing it, and for giving us your feedback. I very much appreciate it. Now, let's go straight to the chase. Please welcome Naas Alcameth to Iblis Manifestations. They always say, we have the saying in multiple different languages, but the saying also goes in English, third time's the charm. We've already tried to arrange this a couple of times before this, and it did not happen. But you know what? I am very glad that it did not happen, because now, with some of the things that we've actually seen from Akhlys just in the last couple of days or so, I think it's a good point to maybe start on that, I would say. Don't you think?
Sure. Yeah. Last 48 hours about, so.
Yeah, so I had a whole list of stuff I was gonna ask you about, and then this came up. I think you posted this status maybe just a day or two ago.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to see. I'm not entirely aware. I mean, all of the bands at some point I feel like are actually gonna get targeted by this whole censorship thing. But I was just curious. I don't actually know the background as to why yourself will have been contacted by this. So I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on that for us, please.
Well, truthfully, it's something that, it's not my first rodeo with this. But of course, as time goes on, these things tend to increase. I think what kind of kicked this all off is back with my previous band, Nightbringer, is we had cited Julius Evola. And Julius Evola, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but he's kind of an infamous character, more so in these days. He has a vast body of esoteric and spiritual work. Ranging from Buddhism to Hinduism, all across the board, a lot of stuff on mythmaking, stuff like that. In his earlier years, he was definitely involved in politics, and now you're talking about probably 1920s through I don't know when he kind of got out of that, but through maybe 1940s, and that is the thing that people fixate on. And the interesting thing is, so we had used a sample, one of the very rare video of him from the 70s. It's in French, and he is speaking specifically about Vamakara, so which is left-hand path. So anybody that's not familiar with that, this is tantric Buddhist left-hand path. And something that's important to us. So it's an entire quotation that just runs through an instrumental song by Julius Evola speaking about this. Well, that was all fine and dandy, and really there was no one screaming about that, especially at the time. Most people, was an obscure figure. And at some point started being cited in more recent years for the political views. And we did a interview with Decibel Magazine, and they had asked us, who are your esoteric influences, and rattled off several of them, which same ones that we've always rattled off: Julius Evola, Titus Burckhardt, Renee Guénon, Andrew Chumbly, and now you're talking about a variety of individuals from a variety of different esoteric, persuasions. And the editor felt it necessary to interject there in the print, considered by some the most racist, fascist, blah, 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 blah. This is put out into Decibel Magazine, large reach. That's kind of where the fire started. And we've been dealing with this ever since.
I understand. So what actually brought this up more recently then? How come this has all of a sudden become a thing? Is there something going on at the moment?
Yeah, really strange because like, as I said, I've dealt with this off and on. It kind of comes and goes. But all of a sudden this just blew up really big and it was over. We are playing a handful of shows with Mgła from Poland.
Yeah.
And so another band that is used to getting this kind of heat, right?
Sure.
And so that probably put the spotlight on us again anyhow, right there. And, of course, we are in full support of Mgła. And there was a third band who apparently is quite popular now that I wasn't previously familiar with at all. I'm not going to try and pronounce their name. You'll have to just look it up. It's a strange one, but apparently they, from my perspective, it looks like they got some heat and they pulled out, right? As is your right. Fine and dandy. So they pulled out, made a statement. That statement kind of snowballed, and here we are.
Okay. Oh, wow. I see. That seems, I don't know, there's too many sides to this, and I'll give you the first thing, okay? I've seen a lot of bands come out throughout the years, especially in the last maybe 5-6 years, maybe a little bit longer, where this sort of thing has actually become quite common, and the censorship has become quite intense. Your statement, by far, I would say, is the one that has resonated with for me the most, because it's like, okay, cool. This is, you just sort of lay the line straight, and I think I like that. I like the thing of not taking bullshit from censorship, because that is something that I personally, having come from someone who was actually born and raised in an Islamic, extremely totalitarian country, I have a big problem with censorship. I don't give a shit what it is that they're even trying to censor. Obviously, there are then things to debate as far as ideology and things like that, but censorship is fucking bullshit. It can fuck off. So I actually really like the way that you handle that, and that you pointed that out. And I think actually, you know what, the support that you guys have probably received in the last day or so probably speaks volumes of that as well, or at least from what I've seen anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. The irony of all this has been pointed out before, so not to be cliche, but it is funny because these people become the monsters that they are supposedly trying to silence, right? And everyone can say they come from this altruistic stance, and they are so passionate about it that they will silence anything and everyone that stands in opposition to not just one or two ideas, but a whole list of ideas. Now, we've gotten a lot of some of the negative feedback we've gotten is, why release a statement of 200 words when you can simply say, I am not a Nazi? So that's something I want to address, because they have basically removed the meaning from these words. It used to be that if you were a Nazi, you were part of a National Socialist Party. So we can move this into modern times and say, okay, a Nazi is someone who, specifically discriminates against another individual based on their culture, skin, blah, blah, blah. That is no longer what it means, and especially not to these people. Now they have this entire laundry list that if you disagree with any one of their points, you are now a Nazi. So what does it mean? So I'm not going to hop on there and go, no, I'm not a Nazi, because now I have just adopted every one of their beliefs, and it ain't going to happen. So, it's kind of a difficult thing, because it's like, it's fine to say we are apolitical. People also roll their eyes at that, right? And at the same time, that could also be interpreted as I'm a fence sitter. I am not a fence sitter. There are many things that I disagree with, but that's all in my personal realm and my personal life. And I don't understand the point where in mass people feel like they have a right to know about every aspect of your personal life.
Isn't the entire point of democracy to have different ideologies and be able to discuss those?
Well, sure, but I don't believe that a lot of these people, the ones that are screaming the loudest, I don't believe that they're on board with democracy.
Oh, yeah, that is exactly why I'm asking the question, because based on what you've just said briefly there, I can see where you are coming from. But this is mostly a question for them, I should say. There should be room for different ideologies, and otherwise it's just a fucking cult, right?
Well, and that's really what it is, and that's what it starts to feel like. And I don't want to apply this to everybody on the left. I have friends that are on the left. I do have friends that are on the right. That is the reality. Yeah. And I've heard arguments from both sides. You were talking about, but specifically the extreme left. The extreme left, once we start getting into stuff like Antifa, so on and so forth, there is a very specific agenda. On top of that agenda, they can place these very altruistic things, again, like don't be racist, right? And then they can sell it in mass. But there's a lot of agenda beneath that. And this is the shit that we're not falling for. Not only that, but when we were talking about my band specifically, it has never had anything to do with politics. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with politics. It's all esotericism. So it kind of resides in a sphere that's above all that. And again, people can roll their eyes at that and be like, whatever. And that's fine. And, part of that statement is, if this isn't sufficient to you, why not just not listen to us? Don't go to our show. Don't buy our CD. Most of these motherfuckers aren't buying our CDs anyways. So listen to it for free. And they have this feeling like, as an artist, you owe them something. I don't owe anyone anything.
No, and you create your art for yourself anyway, right?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it is created for myself. It's kind of like it's kind of a mirror in that regard. It's a manifesting the things that you care about or that you're obsessed with or fascinated with. But beyond that, I wouldn't end it there. I'd say that I also have created this for like-minded people. I always say like knows like. There's other people out there that have these same inclinations as myself. And again, we're now beyond the worldly. We're beyond politics and all this shit. And there's never been a guised gesture or nod to politics in any way, state, or form within the band. It just doesn't exist.
100%. Listen, I think that there's a lot of times these sort of discussions, I simply just have to take a look at the people who are pointing the finger, and I can immediately recognize that they are not even of the same mindset. They don't even view art as the same thing, and it's kind of, it's a case of people will see the world through their own lens, if you will. And I think that the fact that a lot of people maybe even pick on these things, or that they even give a shit about it, or that they're so obsessed with it, is more so a reflection of their own personality, their own beliefs, their own view system. I'll give you a little bit of briefing on myself and my background and for anyone else who's listening. I was born and raised in Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is a country where it's got I think the second strongest censorship after, I think, China or North Korea. Probably North Korea would probably be the first, I'd imagine. But it's fucking crazy. There's a lot of good points to the country, but as far as culture and media are concerned, there's a lot of restrictions over there, you know, to the point that if you're someone who is obviously my experience of it as a black metal fan and more so as an artist is that if your music is considered satanic, then your blood is halal to the other Muslims. So basically they can kill you for that kind of music and arrest you and all kinds of stuff. So that to me,
you are now al-Halaj and you are now worshiping Iblis.
that's correct. Yeah, Iblis. Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah, man. So exactly that. And to the point, so obviously that is still censorship. It's a very extreme form of it, but it is still censorship, you know, and it doesn't apply just to people like us, let's say, but that applies to a lot of other people. I mean, women face some of the worst censorship over in Iran, you know, and gay people, you know, if you're caught as a homosexual, you can even get execution by stoning.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I said, or thrown off a roof.
Yeah, correct. You know, and that is, you know, this is the really crazy part, that the way a lot of Antifa people behave, to me, as someone who actually comes from that world, is very much reminiscent of, for example, how the culture police over in Iran treats homosexuals, treats fans of art, treats people who just want to be free, treats women who want to exit hijab and actually be themselves and be free from that. So yes. I think that, and you know, the saddest part about all of this is that I can recognize that a lot of the people who get into this shit, they're good at heart. They want to do something that's good. However, as a result of, be it upbringing, the whole media fucking bullshit, and the general narrative, let's say, they get fallen into these kind of traps, and then they start targeting people who really should be of their own, you know, and at least even if you disagree with someone, you can debate them, not go and pepper spray people at their fucking gigs, because you don't know how fucking hard it even is for a musician to come and have that space for themselves. You know, like a lot of people who are in these bands, I mean, obviously, Steelfest in Finland just happened, you know, and that's its own whole fucking thing, you know. But even then, I look at that from my personal view, and I'm like, okay, yeah, there's probably a lot of bands here that might have some dodgy fucking ideologies, but let's actually take a look at these people, you know. And this is obviously no insult to anyone who is like a black metal artist, but generally, the majority of people who actually, a lot of them are struggling with serious mental health issues, and this is their fucking outlet. So what you're doing, you're now coming and taking away these people's outlets. So that can only translate in worse ways, either them taking it out on themselves, or actually, without getting to take some of that shit out of their system, becoming even more aggressive in their own ideologies, which goes absolutely against what you're actually trying to do. So that's just the way I look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And no, you're right. And you know, I've seen interviews, for example, from immigrants out of China, and they say the same thing about these extreme left movements. They're like, this, hey, you know, they're warning us, hey, this is very reminiscent, you know, very reminiscent of communist China. But at the same time, it's no fucking secret that we know a lot of these far left organizations they're not hiding it. They're openly Marxist and openly communist. So it's no big surprise. Right? But I think that you have some people that maybe aren't exactly on board with that, but are still maybe moving in that direction without knowing it. And again, it's like you had said, media influence. I mean, people see the world, their lens, as you said, their lens. And even we do, and we don't even realize it. We see it through media. We see it through media because it's face all the time. It is the agitator. You know, it is the one that distorts everything. And so, I mean, look what media does, and look at, you know, it runs with narratives in a very specific direction. And so it's no surprise to see where our society is right now.
No, and it's a real shame that it is becoming that way. I find, because like I keep saying, the part of it that bothers me is I can see a lot of people who are good-hearted. They want the best of everything and everyone, but they're of a certain belief system that is pretty much, it's like imprinted into their brains, and this is because of the media. Obviously, this is something that's become much more so prevalent just in the last 2 years. It seems to just be getting worse, but also a lot of people seem to like have even less trust in the whole situation, where they're like, you know what, I don't think I really buy this anymore, but it's difficult. Like thinking for yourself is not a fucking easy thing to do. But I recommend it. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and another thing is as well, I obviously mentioned the Iran thing and the relationship of, obviously, the reason why we have those laws over there is predominantly because it's the Islamic Republic of Iran. It's because you have Islam. Yeah, you have Islam imprinted into the laws. So naturally, me as someone who at least tries to be a free thinker, I don't even claim it because, like you said, we might even be seeing the world through the lens of the media and not even realize it. But at least as someone who tries to be a free thinker, as someone who tries to see things for what they truly are, I have a real hard time with feeling any form of positivity towards a religion like Islam. In fact, I feel nothing but fucking disdain towards it. You know what I mean? And I think that that's a religion that from its very core is extremely problematic and creates a lot of divide amongst people, even though on the surface it might offer something good. But however, I would still be willing to sit down and have a peaceful conversation with someone who is actually a Muslim or a scholar or of some sort. I would be more than happy to speak to them, even though I completely disagree with them on their ways. Because why? Maybe they know something that I don't, but maybe I know something that they don't. And this is why civil discourse is extremely necessary.
Absolutely. And this is the crux of the issue is I stated this before. I think I stated it. I recently did an interview with Bardo Methodology. But part of the reason why we remained silent for so long is people were like, oh, the silence speaks volumes. It means, this and that. And it's like, this is your game. And it's a game, we cannot win. And you want to bait us into it. They so desperately need monsters. And it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you say. I can get on there and say, I'm exactly like you. I believe in everything you believe. And they'd go, bullshit. You're a fucking Nazi. Yeah. Because this is what it's all about. It's the clamoring fucking mob. It's just madness with a mask of altruism. And it's fucking bullshit. It's not a fucking open forum for debate. That no longer happens. It's an inquisition. And in this inquisition, you are already guilty. That is predetermined. Every word you speak buries you further. And so I was very, very hesitant on even making any kind of statement. But I sure as fuck wasn't going to throw him a bone either. And so it's like, this is not what it's about. The one thing I want to make clear is there's no accord with these people, and I'm not trying to find one. I don't want these people to listen to my music. Any of these accusers, don't do it. We absolutely do not want you. This was never for you. Period. But that's not enough. I mean, they have to try and shut you down. And so it gets pretty frustrating.
I mean, you're on to that point.
Sorry. Quick, I can only imagine what you had to deal with growing up with that. But, for example, one of my hugest influences, especially while writing the last album, comes from Islam. It comes from the Sufis, and specific Sufis, like I had mentioned Al-Halash, and writers like Henry Corban. Of course, these Sufic movements were esoteric Sufism, which is pretty far removed from modern Islam.
Yeah, sure.
But, just pointing that out, like, This is, I mean, just because it came up, huge influence, especially with concepts as like the imaginal, which I can go down a diatribe on this, and I've done it before, but a lot of this is through Sufic thought.
I get you, man. And you're speaking of the last Akhlys record, correct?
Yeah.
Very interesting.
That, dreams and the imaginal were kind of very important things in certain Sufic thought. And there's almost a perennial line that runs from this that predates it all the way to Platonism, Neoplatonism. But again, sorry, I totally digress here. But just as an example of like, there can be so many different facets to any one thing, even a religion, a culture, what have you.
Of course,
we're being pigeonholed into this thing by the left that we are this rigid black and white thing. It's just absolutely not true.
But what even is the left anymore, right? I mean, I don't claim to be someone who is like, I think politics are extremely complicated, but I at least understand this in the modern sense of it, and I think it's like the definition seems to be ever changing, just like you mentioned that the definition of the word Nazi has changed, I mean, that's it's one of them things, it seems to be going further and further and further and further, getting more ridiculous to the point that it seems to be doing like a full circle, and coming around the other side, if you catch what I'm saying.
Well, exactly. And that's why I said that they, are so desperate for monsters, they end up becoming the monsters themselves. They reflect it. Exactly. They become the book burners. But they're fine with that because they go, oh, but the difference is we're right and you're wrong. Right. And so that's incredibly problematic.
It is. That's like exactly how people in Islam think. It's like you try to speak to them and you try to say, hey, man, like how is it cool that like a person is born and they don't choose to be a Muslim, but then they want to change their religion and now all of a sudden they deserve to be killed. And your book says that. They're like, yeah, but no, but like this is for the good of everything, and it's like, yeah, but you need to understand that's just your fucking perspective. Maybe we don't see that the same way. And I feel like it's exactly the same thing. You know what I mean? And I think, if you really believe in something, like I said, I see the good in some of that too. But I think if you really believe in something, if you feel like you want to make a change, maybe actually take a moment to think about how your actions actually going to help the cause that you're going to at least try to bring into the world. Because a lot of these actions, I feel, only makes the problem a lot worse, to be honest with you.
Sure. And I mean, we're talking about fanaticism, right? Fanaticism isn't necessarily a negative thing in and of itself, but it can become a negative thing, once you get that tunnel vision, once it's not informed, or maybe you think it's informed, but you can quickly go down this blind road. And that's what creates, moves ideas from obsession into action. And you have to be really careful about what those ideas are, and what the result is, and what the point is, and not lose yourself in the midst of all that.
Yeah, of course, man. Okay. I'm just going to digress a little bit here because you mentioned about Akhlys and the last album. I'd love to actually talk to you about that because I feel like on the whole politics thing, we'll probably be going in circles, fucking over and over. We can
do this eternally, and truthfully, at the point, it's kind of like it doesn't matter. I can throw my breath into the void, and that's all it is. There won't be an echo back. We are living in Kali Yuga, and I keep that in the back of my mind. All roads lead to Kali Yuga, and what's more important is how you compose yourself and how you stand in the midst of that. In that context, it's not to sound too dire here, but that course is not going to change, and we're going to see these things increase. And it's very eschatological. It's very biblical, that's just where we're going. But anyhow, yeah. So we've probably exhausted that one. So yeah, I'm more than happy to talk about the art itself.
Cool, man. Awesome. So yes, this is actually where I wanted to go with you here. The last release that you did with Akhlys, Melano. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure if I asked one of my Greek friends, they'd probably correct me. But yes, I
Sure.
believe that is pronunciation as said by an American.
Yeah. No, it's honestly, it's just one of them albums, man. You know, but I mean, just on the surface, it seems to have. Uh, let's take a step back here for a moment. Obviously, you have been a musician for many years, right? Like you know
Yeah.
your shit. You've been working at this craft and for many years, trying to make it better and everything. But to me, it feels like this many years into your sort of a career or journey, if you even want to call it, as an artist, it seems to be that maybe the last 4 or 5 years actually seem to be the point where like you're almost like building up to something. Things are getting better and bigger, and you're really like hitting this thing here. And to me, it feels that with the last Akhlys record, you really reached a new peak. Whether from my perspective, at least, as someone who consumes this type of music and is very passionate about it, to me, it seemed that both from an artistic, creative, and even a thematic perspective, it seemed to reach a peak, but also from the external, the sort of the support that it actually seemed to get and the feedback, to me, it seemed to be like at a new peak for yourself as a musician so far. So how true would you actually say that is?
Yeah, I would say that does feel like the case to me. Of course, you know, Melano was kind of a strange beast. With you know these things tend to happen in time and circumstance, and of course, I had spent some time incarcerated and came out of that it right into COVID. And so, you know, right into COVID lockdown, which, you know, just a very surreal thing. And I think anyone can relate to that. Like the whole COVID situation was very bizarre.
Sure, yeah.
And, you know, and I've already kind of reiterated this elsewhere, but, you know, during that time, I think just like the natural anxiety you feel and that surrealness and all those things kind of started to lead to me having certain sleep experiences, dream experiences, what have you, the stuff that informs Akhlys. And at the time, I wasn't necessarily planning on attempting another album. And so found myself in this very bizarre situation and started having, you know, sleep paralysis and strange dreams and all these things. And it was kind of like, to me, it was like an indicator. I was like, okay, well, now's the time. Now, logistically speaking, because of the situation, it was also, you know, in a way fortunate, ironically, because now I'm at home day after day after day, month after month, and this is my outlet. It became an obsession. I've never been able to be quite as focused or obsessed without interruption. There wasn't that. I mean, I'm sure any artist can relate to this, where you're obsessed with an idea, but you got to go to fucking work, or you're at work, or whatever it is. You couldn't even go to the fucking grocery store. So all the shit's removed. And now all I have is my instruments, my recording platform, and these ideas and my books and my dreams. And this is how it happened. And it happened over a period of 5 months. Granted, that first month or two, I had written. Whenever I enter these things, it's very stumbling, and I tend to write a song and get things going, and then realize it's not where it needs to be. But then at some point, something flips, And so that was kind of the case with this. Like I wrote this entire lengthy song. It just wasn't there. And then after that, something clicked during this time, and started to progress through this. But that also leaves me in a very strange place now, because we're talking lightning in a bottle scenario here. And now I don't have that circumstance, And so it becomes even more challenging. Every time you raise that bar, it becomes more challenging. And how do you do these things service? How do you approach it? So I think that
should be a bit more specific, like exactly what you mean on that, of what you're saying there.
Well, because I don't have that circumstance now. I can't stay home day after day and sequester myself in my room and spend 5 months obsessing over writing an album while the world apocalypse mode.
Yeah, so, I understand what you're saying. So basically, no longer actually being in lockdown and then actually being free, so to say. Right, I understand. So yeah, you were saying. Yeah,
so that's the interesting thing now, and something that I pondered pretty much immediately after the release of the album. And I mean, I knew it for what it was, and I'm very proud of it, of course. But then you're like, especially as you get older, there's always this fear of becoming that fucking band that hits that pinnacle and then goes on the back heel slide. I'd rather end it than do that. But of course, there's this part of me that I just can't. I'm perpetually inspired and influenced, and this is my outlet. To me, it is divine. But the interesting thing at this point, so now it's been a couple of years since that occurred, and I just recently, within the last couple months, dove into the next attempt. And I think the anxiety around these things itself created enough friction and enough mental turmoil that you go through like a Negrito process. And it's interesting because the anxiety that brought about became the catalyst. And I can tell you right now, it is off and running to a degree. And now I have that obsession again.
Fantastic.
And even these things like these recent occurrences over the last week, it's like, of course it's fucking stressful. It's very stressful. But, it's like that pressure is what creates diamonds, and it's like all of a sudden I am so fucking inspired, I'm so inspired because my mind's going constantly. I'm thinking about these things. I'm thinking about, and it leads me into like, more just thought and contemplation and self-reflection and all these things. And then at the same time, it kind of like conflict in itself sets my soul on fire. So in some regard, I can say, thank you. Thank you to my detractors, my accusers. The irony is you're just throwing fuel on the fire here. So thank you.
I honestly, I couldn't tell you how much I can fucking relate to that, man. It's one of them things. I always feel like when you really want something in life, that there are, the process of magic, it's not even something that you always even have to be fully aware of it in what format or through what. But to me, it's sort of like when you want something from the universe, it listens, and then it's like, okay, cool. Now you have to pay for it.
Exactly. They're like, here it is at the end of the labyrinth of torment, and now you have to go through that. Yeah, no, exactly. It's never direct or painless by any means.
And it shouldn't be. I mean, I made a whole episode on this earlier on, and we'll go back to the subject of the album itself, of course. But I made an episode earlier on. I think it was episode 3 of this podcast. And actually, I talked about this. I said, what is the most painful thing a human being could ever experience physically? Childbirth. What is the result of that? Life. You ask for life, you pay with pain. And that's just the way it works.
And you're marching towards death.
Yeah.
You are moving towards the inevitable. And that's why I like putting these things in the context of like outside of the individual into the greater whole of like stuff like the Kali Yuga or even death itself. So you are in some sense defeated in the end. It's how you act right now. That's what matters. It's not a reward. It's not going for this fucking reward. It is, for its own sake. The person that you want to be, how you want to compose yourself, the things you want to achieve, you need to do them now. And you need to do them genuinely and without outside influence or outside pressure.
Exactly. And you need to, it's a saying that's been going around a lot in the last year or two, especially, but you need to speak your truth, your own truth, feel it from your stomach that you want to say it and then let it out, and just take it in, whatever it is, as long as it feels right on the inside to put that information out there, the results will be what they need to be, Yeah,
absolutely. And don't give a shit about consequences or people's thoughts or opinions, and the people that live contrary to this, the people that march along thinking that they're residing within a safe space by adding themselves to whatever they believe to be as the majority. That safe space is going to keep shrinking because these people eat them fucking selves. It becomes a landmine, just a minefield of incorrect thought, people's offenses and agitations. And, the greatest currency right now is victimhood. People make their entire personas are based on ranting and raving and victimhood and me too, I'm going to be the loudest voice. Well, we also live in a day and age of social media where everyone has a voice. Now, in one regard, that's a good thing. In another regard, it creates such a cacophony that nothing makes fucking sense. There's no voice of clarity. It's just madness.
The problem is 100% hit the nail right on the head with the victimhood becoming an issue. It absolutely is the mindset now. And honestly, I keep trying to tell people, listen, try to find something that you can actually find strength in, because gaining strength as a human being, whether it's mental or physical, I think the two are connected, but also not devoid of each other. I think that takes a lot of effort. It's not fucking easy to do that. Try to do that and then just see how differently you feel, and then how you can actually have a very positive impact on the world, but someone from the outside, someone who never fucking owns their shit, someone who never takes responsibility for their actions, for what they say, for what they do in their life, might look at someone like you and me who might have actually been through a lot, but then now you've actually taken the path of self-betterment, physically and mentally, and then be like, oh, like these guys are just bullies or whatever, you know what I mean? They see themselves as the victim rather than be like, no, fuck that. Dave got there through effort. Let me try and at least find some of that within myself, because my path is my own. But when you reach that level where everyone has sort of, it takes time. It takes time to get to a level where it's like, okay, you're never going to be perfect. You're never going to be fucking perfect in life. You're never going to have figured out everything. But if you just fucking try, if you just put in the effort and own your shit, you will see that things will happen in a way that's much better. It just feels right how things, align, I should say.
Yeah, that's an outlook to have. And I always try and take anything, any crisis or even just anything in life. I try and take the stance of, empowerment and strength. This is how you should be looking at things. Put yourself on top of the mountain instead of beneath it and going, woe is me, this mountain is so heavy. It's so prevalent now, and everyone is taught and told and convinced that you are a victim. You're a victim, and you should be mad, and you should rant, and you should rail, and this is how you should live out the entirety of your life. And do it through social media and do it through all these things, and consume and consume and consume, and be the victim, and and then at the same time, on the other token, it's it's interesting because people that take the opposite stance, it's for probably the first time in history, it's very looked down on. It's so bizarre to stuff like physical fitness can be directly aligned to fucking fascism. I'm like, this is fucking nuts. I was like, this is fucking nuts. The healthiest things you could possibly do are now frowned upon. They're saying, no, don't buy it. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. Stay at home, stay on your phone, eat this bullshit, get fat. And at the meantime, be very angry because you are a victim of these other people.
Exactly that, man. It seems to be a very intentional sort of blueprint of society at the moment, but you know what? Okay, let them be that. I think as long as that there are people who will be able to see the truth for what it is, and who will be able to see how much of an improvement you can actually make on the world just by fucking being yourself, just by owning your own shit, just by putting in the effort. Listen, I look at people, I myself, I wasn't always going to the gym or anything like that. I only started maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I used to be, I think, I'll try and tell it to you in American weights, I should say, but I think I used to be about 260 pounds.
Yeah, I actually saw your pictures. That's incredibly impressive, especially for, that amount of years is a small amount of time as far as lifting goes.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, man.
Work that shows dedication, and kudos to you.
No, cheers. But this is the thing, the reward is for me. Like, I feel like a different person. I feel like a better person. I feel like I own my shit. I take responsibility for what I do, and honestly, I just feel better about the fact that I'm even around. You know what I mean? You mentioned something earlier, and I really like that. When you said, all paths lead to Kali Yuga. It's what you do now that makes a difference, or at least, it makes an impact, and that's what counts. To me, that is exactly the case. I have a very kind of, I almost want to say, sort of a romantic relationship with death and the ending of all things.
Absolutely,
because
that's why you're metal.
Yeah, of course. But it's in the sense that I'm not obsessed with it any longer, because I understand it for what it is. And for me, it's like, I see it as some kind of, it's like a reward. You earn it. You have to earn your death. Simply lying still until it takes you is an insult to death. I think you have to earn it. So when you greet him, you're standing on your feet and not on your knees. And
absolutely,
I think when you greet him,
and that's why, again, exactly what you pointed out, what you do now is important.
Yeah.
There are different ways, different modes you can go towards that mysterious gate of death. Mm-hmm. And you definitely don't want to do it in a way that's not favorable to yourself. And that's why I've always had a lot of respect for, like, say, the old Scandinavian religion. You've got the concept of Ragnarok, and it's like there's no winning. There's no winning. They already know they're going to lose. That's not the fucking point.
Yeah.
The point is going forth and knowing this inevitable outcome, but you are still all the more glorious for it.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
Being glorious, there is no reward. That is more glorious.
Yeah. I had one of my friends. This is a really grim fucking joke, but one of my friends was like, why you trying to put on all that muscle mass, And I just said to him, I said, because I want to feed the maggots well. I want to give them a good dish.
Yeah, that's very Conan.
Yeah, it is.
Well, it's funny because, these kind of comments always just, it's like this cynical view of anybody that's doing anything to better themselves, that these people will get a knee-jerk reaction because they are not doing it themselves, or they're not capable, or they have this inner judgment upon themselves. So they instead redirect that outwards. And that's how I see a lot of even the attacks on like bands and stuff. It's like usually it's come from the people that don't do shit. They don't contribute a fucking thing. They're not fucking artists, or if they are, it's very fucking, not impressive. And instead, what they do, instead of spending all the time like that an artist would spend, toiling over creating better and better art or music or whatever it is, these people, instead of that, they come from the stance again of victimhood and apathy. And instead they rant and rail and rave and accuse everyone. And, this is what they do.
Yeah.
And then their big achievements are when they finally get someone canceled. They're like, aha, here's my achievement. I have achieved essentially nothing. It is the weakest discourse. And it is, I just can't imagine being these people.
There's that saying, how I think it goes something like, how do you want to have the tallest building in the city? By building the tallest building, or by knocking all the other ones down?
Exactly. Yeah, perfectly said. Perfectly said.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the thing of you mentioned repetition and things like that, and obviously doing this is something that obviously takes effort, and you actually, when you said repetition, I'm pointing to when you said that when the COVID lockdowns happened and you basically had nothing to do but just your art and just a repetition of the process. Just to go back to the point of the album, this was something that I actually, I think one of the times I listened to it, I actually was envisioning this in my head. You know how you always get creative sparks when you listen to music, which your music is really fucking good at doing that, by the way, just as a little point there. But what's the name of, how do you pronounce the name of the second song on the album? Negalian, right?
Yeah. Silent P.
What's that?
The silent P.
Silent P. Negalian. I love it. What does that actually mean?
So basically it's a reference to a nightmare seen in different aspects at different times, but we're again kind of speaking of a nightmare entity.
Sure, I understand. So like a sleep paralysis demon.
Yeah, sleep paralysis. It's a funny thing because I follow these various podcasts, interviewers, yada yada, ranging from paranormal to esoteric, and the sleep paralysis thing has come up more recently. And it's funny because it's been debunked. It's been debunked. We fully understand sleep paralysis and its mode, and it is completely a biological and mental thing is how they interpret it. So I want to interject that real quick because that's a false statement. What is understood, and this is why I don't like saying sleep paralysis. So when we say sleep paralysis, we're talking about the body's natural inclination to shut down the motor system during deep sleep, right? That's what usually occurs, and the body does this, so obviously you don't fuck yourself up in your sleep. When sleep paralysis occurs, there's an interruption there. We understand how that occurs in the brain, yada, yada. So that's just sleep paralysis. What people are failing to point at is that during this thing that we do absolutely understand, scientifically, biologically, we do understand it. But what occurs during that is it puts you into a state that when people say dreaming, that's not correct. It's actually a hypnagogic state. It occurs before dream state occurs, but after, it's during the process of falling asleep, right? But for some uncanny reason, during this hypnagogic state, these visions occur. And I won't even call them hallucinations because that's an incorrect term again. Now, what's bizarre about that is that these visions have a cross-cultural similarity and specificity. There is a guy who wrote a book on this and now I'm trying to remember his name. The book is called The Terror That Comes in the Night. And anyhow, this is exactly what he goes into. And
what was the name of the author again?
Now I'm trying to remember the name of the author, and of course, now that I'm trying to think of it, it's escaping me. But I'll get back to you on that. But
yeah, sure. So you were saying that
David Hufford. David Hufford is the name of the author, and he basically just kind of fell into this haphazardly, writing his thesis in college, and ended up spending his whole career doing thousands of case studies. And he found that this is not culturally bound, because you can have mental illnesses and phenomena that are culturally bound. The bizarre thing is that you can find and I think he points to like up to 5 or 6 very specific hallmarks of these things that happen universally, and they've been written about through time. So I totally digressed there, went down a whole different route there.
No, but I'm interested. I didn't interrupt because I'm very interested in this. So carry on, please.
Yeah, and it's something that's come up is because people like, be like, oh, you put all this importance on sleep paralysis, but check out this article. We understand sleep paralysis. There's nothing bizarre about it. I'm like, well, yeah, you understand the process of sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what happens to occur during sleep paralysis.
When you are in that state, yeah.
Puts you in a hypnagogic state. So we can relate this to meditation. Also can put you in a hypnagogic state, right?
Sure.
So it's just another catalyst. It's just one that people tend to fall into accidentally, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, what actually are some of your experiences? Because let me say one thing as well. Obviously, if it makes you feel at least a little more comfortable, this is something that I personally have experienced, and I have my own viewpoints of it, and my views are actually of at least what I think happens when you're in that state are probably too batshit crazy to even try and explain. But I'm happy to which I'm happy to get into. I'm just curious as to, because you said that this was a regular occurrence during the time of the pandemic for you. So I'm a little curious as to what were you actually seeing, like what the fuck, like even birthed this whole project that then came out of that. What was the spark of it?
Well, a little bit of context is I had these kind of occurrences, and not only the sleep paralysis, but other things that would be considered parasomnias, right? Related to either sleeping, dreaming, falling into sleep, coming out of sleep. I've had these ever since I can remember, since I was a child. I was the kid that was having horrible nightmares, sleepwalking, sleep paralysis, the whole 9 yards. Even out-of-body experience type things. But always, and so it's always hard to relay these things to people, because as soon as you say, I was falling asleep, they go, you're dreaming. Case solved. But as the experiencer, you can be like, no, there's a significance there that you can never relay. And it's just like anything spiritual. You can't ever hope to relay that to someone in some discursive fashion that's going to be significant enough to truly relay it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You have to experience it. You just do. And it's not to say that everything, I've hallucinated and taken drugs and done all these different things. I've had different mindsets through different times, and some things you can pass off as purely psychological. And not to say that even these things are contrary to a psychological mode. I think the psychological mode is a part of a bigger puzzle. It's almost like an opening of a gate. I think when you dive into stuff like especially later Carl Jung, you could start to make certain parallels. But yes, and here's the other counter argument people will give is, so now when I say COVID was happening, came out of incarceration, all these things, super stressed out, right? Like super stressed out. They're like, oh, okay, well, you're stressed out and that explains this all. It's purely psychological. Well, then we look into, if you put any stock into anything spiritual, how do you get yourself into these modes of meditation or prayer, right? It's usually through distress, it's through fasting, sleep deprivation, self-inflicted pain, And so there is a parallel here, whether you did it to yourself or the world did it to you. The greatest moments of clarity usually come in like the most dire moments of distress.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, actually, it's funny you should say that. I'm about 10 hours into fasting right now as we speak.
Yeah, well, there you
But
go,
yeah, based on what you were just saying to me there, one thing that I actually picked up was that obviously this is something that's actually been an issue for you for a while. As in not even so much in terms of that the struggle is related to the time frame of it, although you said that you've had this for most of your life. But I'm mostly pointing to the fact that it seems to be a general, like a genuine issue, that there seems to be that there's no one that can really help with this, like no professionals, no friends. There's no one that can help with this. And I, from my own, at least my personal experiences, I don't know how much of some of the, let's say, symptoms we might have had in common. I find that when you experience something like this, it stays with you for a while, like for a whole day. If you wake up one day from an experience like that, or if you have it throughout the night, go back to sleep and you're okay, and then you still wake up, you still feel the effects of that experience, almost like you feel it here in your chest, like it somehow like almost taints how you are for a long time afterwards. So I'm just wondering if you could just go a bit more into that, and then
Sure.
maybe see exactly what it was that you were experiencing there.
Sure. I'd like to clarify my view on it, though. Of course, as a child, which these things are known to occur more in childhood, and they did. They occurred very frequently the younger I was, right? They became more infrequent into adulthood. They kind of increased again in my teen years. Again, some of these incidents, and one of them I ended up in the hospital. I was 12 years old. I mean, that's how dramatic it got. But
how were you? How did you end up in the hospital? What was even the? I mean, that must have been quite bad.
Really bizarre. I was sick, and so we talked about these catalysts, right? So like fasting, sleep deprivation, yada yada. I had the flu. I had the flu as a child. I was 12, maybe 11 or 12. I was in sixth grade, whatever age that would be. But I remember the last thing I recall was being very, very sick, flu symptoms, laying at the end of my parents' bed while my dad watched football. And they were, of course, monitoring me and whatnot. And the next thing I remember, very, very specifically, because I mean, this is so long ago. I mean, I'm fucking almost 42 years old now, and I remember this very specifically. I woke up, my door was open in my bedroom. I was laying on my side, which is actually kind of interesting because usually when sleep paralysis occurs, it occurs while you're prone, but can occur when you're on your side. I was on my side looking out into the downstairs living room, and my eyes were fixated on a poster. Now, this poster has no significance at all in itself. It was a poster of like some 1980 something or other Olympics poster my parents had framed. I'm staring at it, and I have this overwhelming feeling of not only a presence, but that dread. And I like the term dread. My friend Richard Gavin, who writes esoteric books and horror books, has written about this at length, why the term dread is more sufficient here, because it implies something that's metaphysical. It's not a fear of death. It's something more uncanny than that, right? That dread that just displaces you. Abject dread. And that abject is that displacement. So anyhow, experiencing exactly that, right? And I don't remember anything after that. Anyhow, apparently, so I have only fragments after that. I have fragments of a lot of chaos and panic, my family being upstairs. I was now in the upstairs living room. Paramedics are on the way, yada, yada, go to the hospital. And during this, what was relayed to me after, and especially for my older sister who was there for all this, was basically I slept walked upstairs with no pants on and my shirt on, and my parents were saying I wasn't breathing properly and they couldn't snap me out of it. And so of course they panicked, and I don't know if this is an old wives thing or what, but my mom took me into the bathroom and ran the bath hot water to get steam, to thinking that's going to help me breathe. And I'm like, years later I'm like, I don't know if that's that's a legit thing, but anyhow, didn't seem to solve the issue. And they said during that time I started to act very erratic behavior that started kind of escalating, and to the point that they had just figured I had a seizure. And maybe I fucking did. Who fucking knows? But the strange thing is, like, when talking to my older sister about this, which it woke her up, she was upstairs, she said I'd go between being a little scared boy going, help me, help me, help me, to acting very erratic. And this sounds pretty tame, but for a 12-year-old, like at that time I didn't swear, but I was saying like, fuck you, fuck this. At one point my sister said I turned her and, locked eyes with her, and I was like, what are you looking at, you fucking bitch? And one of the more significant things is my sister said I kept staring at the ceiling where it meets the corner of the wall, and I would say, help me, help me, help me, and I'd say the devil's coming out of me, which I used for lyrics. That's in The Dreaming Eye, which I didn't even remember that. I didn't remember that myself. That's what my sister relayed afterwards. But, really, really bizarre thing, really bizarre thing.
Wait, so you did the lyrics and then you found out later that this was what you were saying?
No. That would have,
okay.
That would have been awesome. But no, I cannot make that claim. No, my sister had told me, this is probably 10 years ago, we talked about, my parents don't like talking about that shit. They're Catholic, and that shit kind of bothers them, so they don't want to sit down and rehash all that.
Well, but I appreciate you talking about it, to be honest with you, because I know I understand with these things, it's one thing when you're observing someone else, or you're looking at a case, or you're watching a film, but the fact that you experienced it, and it's like, to know that sort of process might have occurred within you,
sure,
whatever it was, is very much open to interpretation, although I feel like we both probably have an understanding of it, of our own. But it still must be like quite uncomfortable to know that it's like, that's about as like close as it can get for something like that, right?
Truthfully, to me now, I love it. I think it's and when these things, so they do occur far less. I can go a year or two without having any sleep paralysis or any kind of uncanny sleep experience. So I kind of flipped as I got older and got into these things. Now I want them to occur, because you are hedging upon the liminal. The liminal is always going to be a trial. And, so I want these things to occur. And a really interesting thing, which I've talked about in previous interviews, but as I got older, there's like this innate mode that I go into with the typical sleep paralysis, presence in the room, right? Emanating dread. It feels suffocating. You feel pushed down. I go into a strange mode of where I just innately try and push the experience further by being antagonistic. And the craziest fucking thing was when I started recording or started tracking Melano. It was brought to my attention that from my girlfriend that I was having these occurrences happen because it would wake her up, right? And she was like, "You're talking, you're like doing all the shit," and so I was like, and this was like night after night for probably about a window of maybe a week and a half. And so immediately, and I told her, I was like, I wish you would have fucking recorded this. And so then I had the idea. I was like, I'm going to use, and I just use the memo app on my phone. It's just an Apple phone.
Yeah.
And it recorded where I learned 6 hours at a time. And I recorded, and I fucking caught it on like the third fucking night. And I have all the audio from it, and I included it in Sakibare, the track on Melanie. And so we included it in the mix. Now it's like, it's probably going to be disappointing to anyone. That sounds very dramatic, right? But it's me sleep talking during a sleep paralysis event. And I, of course I took some portions out and just chose the best parts or whatever. But really it was just like, if you listen to it, it's me like exhaling as people do when they're sleep talking, and, kind of in between, almost like a snoring. And I'm, basically saying like, is that all you got? Is that all you got? You motherfucker, which is pretty funny, like a little comical, but is that all you got? And so I took that segment, but I was like, it was really interesting because like I had 6 hours of basically sleeping, a bunch of random noise, threw it into Cubase, looked for the sound spikes, zoomed in, and I did this like the couple nights before and had nothing, absolutely nothing. And on the third night, I was like, there it is. I was like, there it is. I cleaned it up, increased the volume, and then I threw it into the ambient track, and it's on there now. So, but yeah, really fucking interesting. But this is the mode I go into now, naturally, because it's almost like I'm daring it. I'm, antagonistic to push. I want to push the experience to its limit.
But that sounds like a very similar sort of what's the right word for it? It's like a very similar sentiment, very similar demeanor to what you said that you experienced as a child, that your sister was saying, like that's like a very similar kind of approach, don't you think? Like from the,
yeah,
give me what you got, or like, what's your problem, bitch? What are you looking at? Like it's kind of like I see that's kind
maybe perhaps, although that felt more like a again, I mean, this sounds so dramatic, but it almost felt like possession. That felt like me not being me all of a sudden into a maniacal and very violent and hostile state. Whereas this is, I still feel me being intentionally antagonistic towards whatever the fuck this is, So, and of course, it's like, I don't get lost on these things. I am the skeptical occultist always. I think about, the psychological implications, like what these other things can be. I don't want to just latch on to the most wild theory and run with it. I like to go through a path of reductionism to get at these things. So, I want to throw that out there. I know anytime, especially like, this is why I don't like no one likes sharing these kind of stories just because you just seem fucking nuts, or people have a tendency just to fucking bullshit, but
yeah,
I mean, this is what it is. And luckily something like sleep paralysis, hypnagogic, whatever you want to call it, visitations, so many people have had them. It's not that unique. At least once in their life, if not more. A lot of people have sleep paralysis, like 3 out of 5. But many of those 3 have had that with an uncanny, bizarre thing they can't explain. And usually we can reduce that to at least a feeling of a presence in a room. Now, you asked me earlier, what do I see? I don't ever see anything. I see my room exactly how it is. I see and people are like, you're dreaming. It's like, no, you're not dreaming. Your eyes are open. If the sun is coming through your room at a left angle, that's what you're saying. You are in a hypnagogic state. You are not truly asleep. You are actually, your eyes are still working. Your brain's still receiving. For me, I know for some people do see, and there's interesting things there. Usually like a shadowy figure, something crawling on the bed. Now, I have felt the pressure on the bed a couple times, but that's pretty rare. Usually people feel the pressure on their chest, which we could probably attribute that to the biological mode of sleep paralysis itself, but
I just personally, I don't buy that part. I've had experiences of my own, and I know other people who've had experiences. I don't yeah, the pressure
I don't
thing,
it doesn't do it justice. That's for sure. With me, I don't see it. I think the closest I came to actually seeing something, but in the moment, it doesn't fucking matter. And not only is there a presence, but it's even in a specific locale. Like if I was able to move, I could point to it. I could be like, it's right. And it's usually above me. It's usually above the bed. And sometimes this happens where I will be having not your common dream, but either a lucid dream or just a very uncanny nightmare. And it will kind of slip back and forth. Like I'll come out of that into the hypnagogic state where my eyes are open, I'm viewing the room. And sometimes I feel like this presence began in the dream and then now is there. And it could be the opposite too. It could be the opposite. Like I'm falling asleep, I'm not asleep yet, and the presence is there. And then, that soporic feeling that you get and you fall into slumber and now it's existing with you there, And so it's a very bizarre thing. It's very strange.
So I'm gonna go into some of my own experiences on this because I think that so this sounds probably crazy, but I think we've opened the Pandora's box, so let's just fucking dig into it. I've for me, at least my personal belief, this is very hard to support. Okay, but from the little bit of spiritual understanding that I have, and from just observing how things work, I think what happens is maybe we have some kind of a guard that comes down during sleep, that when you're awake, when you're around, there's not much that can really get to you. But I feel like sometimes when you're asleep, if that guard is somehow exhausted, whether it's throughout the day, and I think negative experiences can actually exhaust that guard somehow as well. And I think if that becomes weaker and it comes down, there are other things that then can have access to you. They can get close to you, whereas normally they wouldn't be able to. And I also think this is the part that makes me a little uncomfortable about death in general, is the fact that is knowing that the veil will break down and it will come down, and then whatever's there can actually have access to you then. You know what I'm saying? In the
absolutely realm.
I mean,
which is a very if you look back to like ancient Iran or even Egypt, that would be very in accord with their religious beliefs. But yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it's like I feel like in the day world, we have the physicality and the mundane around us, and we are overwhelmed. Our sensory, we're overwhelmed by this shit. We have to engage in it constantly. And then once you lay down to sleep, obviously that goes away suddenly. But the mind is still there. The mind's always still there. I mean, I could bring this into a Neoplatonic sense and say everything is mind. Mind is always there. Yeah. Mind exists vastly beyond us. We're only a fraction of mind. That goes down another rabbit hole. But anyhow, once that, you're absolutely right. Once that occurs, so now you've untethered yourself from the earth, right? And so you're open to all kinds of things. And again, I would point to, I think what is significant, I said this at the beginning of the interview, is the Islamic Sufic esoterics that went into stuff like the imaginal. Na Koja Abad is the specific term for it. And it also is known as the eighth climate. It's what's called the imaginal. The imaginal now, in this sense, isn't mundane flights of fancy. It is this concept that everything is intellect and mind, and this informs symbols. Symbols come down into our brains, yada, yada, yada. And now you are flying into this realm. Now, if we want to put it into like a Kabbalistic sense, this would be Yesod. And so now I'm, again, going down another rabbit hole here on.
Man, listen, it feels like me and you could be at this for fucking days. There's a lot of area. I think we have a mutual understanding, but and actually funny, you mentioned Nakojo, but in my language, I mean, I know what that is, but in my language that actually means the nowhere,
Exactly. And that is exactly it. It is and that is the ground. And so one of the more recent occultists that I've been quite obsessed with is David Hyam Smith, who he without being tied to any religion, he is taking like stuff like Lurianic Kabbalah and just taking it even further into apophatic approach, and his stuff is just amazing. Like, it's all based on these concepts that also find resonance in Platonism, in Sufism, yada yada. And it's that reality is groundless. It is truly infinite. If there was to be a concept such as a true reality or God, I'm using that as a placeholder, it's not in a Christian context, it has to be infinite. For a thing to be infinite, it has to include all possibilities at all times. Otherwise, it is not limited. It is, or it's not unlimited. It's limited. And it has to include its own paradoxes. I mean, you just think about the shit forever and just, it's brain bleeding.
Yeah.
But yeah, Nakoja Abad is exactly what you said. And you'll see this in my lyrics too. And I'll say, Naas of the void. So Naas is, anybody familiar with Platonic terms, we could grossly say it is mind, it is intellect. Naas of the void. Beneath which is no thing, the nothing. I'm talking about Nakoja Abad, the eighth climate.
Yeah, it's fucking. It's so fascinating, man. Honestly, like you said as well, it's almost. It's like my mind is racing, but I'm even having a little bit of a hard time actually thinking that holy shit, we're actually having a conversation about this in words in the third dimension. Like you can, just the fact that such a thing is brought to this level, I think is fucking great. But
it's great, and the thing that's mind blowing about once you get into these conversations is the difficulty, but also the fascination. Is you can start to grasp on these ideas, like mentally, you can start to think about it and be fascinated, but they can't be relayed through discourse. Discourse is not, any kind of intellectual discourse falls short of it.
Yeah.
But that's also what's so compelling about it. That's what's so compelling is then you start to know that something exists beyond the capacity of human intellect, science, discourse, language. I mean, I was talking to a friend earlier about the enigma of the word logos. You can contemplate that word for the rest of your fucking life. It's endless. And now you got to think of logos so you can look up the definition of logos and we can say it's word. It's word, right? Or we could say it's breath. Or we could say it's an idea that comes down from who knows where through the imagination into the mind as a symbol. And then that symbol we articulate into thought, and then we exhale it out of our mouth. So it's from the ephemeral realm into manifestation. And you've done the whole creation process just by saying a word.
Yeah.
Now, in a Christian context, this is the word of God that kicks off Genesis. It's the logos.
Well, words are powerful. I mean, just by speaking, you are creating spells. We even have the thing spelling. You're actually casting spells with every single word that you put out there. That's why I think
exactly.
there is,
the Greek term. If you look at Goetia, the Goa, that part, and that one's really interesting because not only does it denote speaking, physically speaking out of your mouth, but also has a connotation of not just speaking, but wailing. And furthermore, has a connotation to a wailing related to death. And this is like where you get terms like Goetia from. So really interesting stuff, because this strikes at this idea that you are the symbols, archetypes, and not limited in a psychological aspect. Symbols, and I've said this before, they're the most sufficient language. They are the language of the gods because they can at least approximate an articulation discourse cannot do. So symbols are very, very important. And now if you could take those symbols and then you're taking it down another level and breaking them into physical speech and exhaling. And of course, breath is so important in, metaphysics. That's why you have the prana and what have you. Um,
Breathe in,
but it just,
breathe out.
contemplate. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And during the sleep experiences, that's what I'm doing. I'm breathing in, breathing out.
Yeah.
But in my mind, something's coming in and out during that,
Yeah.
and that I exhale thee. That's when the presence occurs. And in some of those instances, I don't see it as, paradoxically, I see it as something that is foreign to me. It is the other, but it's also my other. It's my dark reflection, my black mirror of myself. It's my shadow self.
Shadow. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. I think, obviously breathing is extremely important. And you know what? It's funny that this has actually come up because I had a whole thing fucking just earlier today, where I was going through this stressful experience. And then I was like, no, hang on. This is you control this reality. You've got it in your hands, and a little bit of breathing, intentional breathing in the way. And it's like your subconscious sometimes it knows more than what you have direct access to, and you just got to trust it and go with it, and it just works perfect. You know what I mean? And then the exhaling and it was fucking perfect. And obviously we've gone back to Akhlys again. I wanted to also actually ask you this, just to digress a little bit as well. You were obviously talking about all these fucking experiences. I mean, this is some stuff that, especially like I said, obviously you and I, we're having a conversation, and there may be actually some mutual understanding of some of these phenomena there. But at the end of the day, that is an experience that you can only do so much to talk about, right? At the end of the day, that is an experience that is of your own, and only you can really understand it and feel the effects of it, and really decipher it the best. So do you find that, and obviously I find that art is very much this kind of art where it's genuine, where it's like so fucking powerful. It's a genuine, it's a direct, direct result, a direct product of some of the subconscious, that you somehow then are able to manifest and spit it out into this physical world. Do you find a lot of comfort, at least, in actually sitting down, maybe playing on the guitar, or maybe creating some of these things? Because you mentioned that you feel better from taking the antagonistic stance towards such things, like, yeah, come on, give me what you got, rather than sort of being a victim of it. And do you feel that with art, by taking control of things, or at least being able to control a piece of it, do you feel that that's something that gives you more comfort, in a sense, at least?
I would say maybe not necessarily comfort, but empowerment. And I'm kind of I should watch the terms I use here. I was about to say I'm a band Nazi, but
man.
Yeah, it's too late. It's out. Yeah. They'll just fucking edit this one and throw it up. But now, as far as the music goes, like, I have to be in absolute totalitarian control at all times, and not always. Like, Nightbringer is a collective, and I really enjoy doing Nightbringer, and it's just a different dynamic. It's a different dynamic because you have multiple people contributing, so it becomes something that you'd never guess. But with Akhlys, it's so deeply personal to me that I can't have an outside influence. It has to be me reflecting myself at all times. The only aspect where that does not occur is the drums, because I'm not a drum. Sorry, my phone's fucking up. But so I, with pulling together a live lineup, I made that very clear, and everyone's very cool with it. And it's just like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, I'm not gonna have anyone else contribute besides the drummer. Like, this has to be, I wanted to get into something at some point of like my own self obsession with these things that are so personal that I just feel it wouldn't have been done justice otherwise, but yeah, I do like to, take control of that. And even that antagonistic outlook in these instances, you could equate that to the heroic outlook. And so you can go back to like even like the Greeks, like in their rituals, any proper ritual was a reenactment of death, right? And so it's what you would call dying before you die. There's a heroic aspect to that. And so anything heroic is going to be naturally antagonistic. You're placing yourself against a insurmountable force and walking through it, and this is how I see that. But yeah, I like to try and reflect this in my music too, like, and I realize like a lot of this is so personal, like Dreaming Eye especially was literally just lifted straight out of my dream journal. And it was, I'm literally relaying dreams that have no context to anyone but myself. It's like an old woman is seeking. I'm like, what that? And they're like, what is the esoteric meaning there? I'm like, I don't know. it's literally, I was dreaming that. Now,
and honestly, that is one of the most terrifying fucking albums ever. I mean, you take the cover, you look at the album cover, and you listen to it. I mean, especially the last song, the Dreaming Eye, with the I rather than the letter I, and it's just like, fuck, is really phenomenal work, and I can completely see that. That's where I was coming from, where I say that it's a translation of experiences that you cannot put into words. You can only experiences through something.
Sure. Absolutely. And with Melano it was a bit different because there was a bit of that, but instead of just like with Dreaming Eye, I just straight up lifted out of my dream journal, and I was like, this is gonna seem like a bunch of fucking nonsense to everyone, and I'll put it as poetically as I can, but I don't even know what half this shit means. I just dreamed it. Melano is a bit different approach. It was taking those kind of things and trying to ruminate about them and interpret them, and then through a lens of the various things I'm into, like I was saying, like the Islamic Sufism was a big influence. So was a lot of the Greek stuff, Platonism, Neoplatonism. That's huge for me, and even Kabbalah. So I was kind of mythicizing these experiences through that lens. Again, it's just like another poetic tongue or voice of how I'm going to express these things, and looking back and finding how others express them, other illuminated souls that put so much emphasis on, powerful dream experiences.
Well, actually, let me tell you something here. Right. So I have never talked about this publicly myself. I don't know if you might have seen this or not, but basically, the debut album that I released with my band, Trivex, we, if you look at the cover for that, it's a really strange picture. It's like most people would look at it and go, how is this the cover of a black metal album? But basically what it is, to give you a quick explanation, it's two halves. It is, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because I think that you will be able to relate to it as well. It's two halves on this album. On one side is a picture of a sunflower, right? And on the other end is a face. It's sort of like a demonic, like a spirit face.
Sure.
I had a really crazy experience, I think, when I was about 6 years old, where it's a really long story, and it's kind of a horrible story for me to even think about, actually. But basically, I had asked. There was an advert on Turkish television, because we used to have Turkish satellite, and on this there used to be a sunflower in between the adverts, where the sunflower would close, right? And then whenever the program would come back, the sunflower would open. And I had asked my mother, I was like, Mom, can you buy me one of these kind of sunflowers that opens and closes, please? And she was like, yeah, sure, I can buy you one of those. And then she bought me one. And after a while, I was like, this is not opening and closing. What the fuck is going on? And then in a childlike tantrum, I think, I mean, like I said, I was 5 or 6 years old, but I actually snapped the sunflower in half. like out of sheer rage. I don't know why, but something was just like really fucking with me that night. I don't know why I acted like that, which is really sad. It's like that was a gift, from someone. And then, it's like, what the fuck did you do that for? But anyway, that night, I had the weirdest I had one of the strangest dreams. Like, it wasn't a dream. Now where we.
Oh, I did exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And I I actually saw a figure in the air, which looked like some kind of almost like a gorilla, surrounded by clouds, dark blue, like a demonic thing, with very, very wide open mouth, almost talking but pointing at me like that. And I kept saying, "Mom, mom, Qul is here." Qul in our language is like beast, but it was beast in the sense of maybe more like a jinn rather than jinn as in DJ.
DJ. Yeah.
And rather than
Qul.
Qul. So yeah, like GHOOL. Yeah.
Yeah, like that's where the I mean, etymology, ghoul.
Ghoul,
Al-Ghul.
Al-Ghul. Yeah, that's right. And I kept saying to her, I was like, "Mom, the ghoul is here," and he's, and it was like pointing at me like, "Shayan, and I don't know what it was trying to say, but it's like, and then I remember waking up, and my mother was still next to me. She was asleep, and I remember looking at the location where it was at, and it was no longer there. And
really interesting because, for one, so you've got a sunflower, obviously symbol of the sun opening and closing. You get it and you break it, so you've killed the sun, and then you dream about a jinn, basically a ghoul, and it's the significant thing you pointed out is it's in the sky. So these are jinn, or spirits of the air. They're the smokeless fire, right? Like Iblis is the smokeless fire. He's the sulfur where the rest were light. He was not light. He was made from, basically sulfur, the smokeless fire. So I think that's incredibly significant. And it's interesting that manifested to you in that context, because that's a very Islamic context, where in my context, growing up as Catholic, I'm saying, the devil's coming out. Yeah. The devil's coming out. And so I think these are terms and masks that we associate culturally, but we're putting them on the same fucking thing.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like the fucking pyramids, man. It might be in different locations, but it's the same fucking thing. Obviously that's like a different thing, but yeah, 100%. I know exactly what you're saying. It's very interesting. This is why I always say that those of us who get into this music, I'm sure there are others who maybe don't, who have similar experiences and take different paths in life. But those of us specifically who do this music for the reason that we do, I always feel like it chose us rather than the other way around. And these sort of common experiences are exactly the reason why I think that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're following something. Or if they didn't choose us, then it was... again, however you want to interpret it, your shadow self, your higher self. If we put it to like a ceremonial context, it could be like the Golden Dawn HGA, Holy Guardian Angel. It doesn't fucking matter. Like, these are there is this reflection, your otherness, and maybe that's what leads up. Maybe it's there's a book that's very important to me called The God of Socrates. And he's speaking of Socrates. Of course, Socrates never wrote a word, so he's a bit mythicized, but talking about his concept of his higher daemon, and just, read through that. It's a quick read, but it's just so like
the higher god of Socrates. Yeah.
It's just called The God of Socrates.
The God of Socrates. Yeah. I will have to check that out, man.
Yeah, also, like Neoplatonist, but really fucking good, man, and just, but it really like puts a lot of things that we're talking about into context. An amendment here, so God of Socrates is by Apuleius, and he was not a Neoplatonist. I said he was a Neoplatonist. He was a Platonist, so he was in the Platonist period.
Okay, sure.
So no one can save over that one.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, listen, man. People will see and hear what they want to hear, So there's not much ways of, I
don't want anyone checking me on my Platonic philosophy.
Yeah, it's okay, man. Listen. The only speech is free speech. Don't fucking. Obviously, that obviously was the case for that one. But don't like censor yourself. You know what I mean? That's what we're doing this fucking thing. Is to get away from that shit. Anyway, I want to bring this back down a little bit to the album, to the Akhlys album. Because I was gonna go. I was actually gonna talk about Nigalian. I said that correctly.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember correctly from moments earlier. Yeah, I mean, just the way the album starts, it has such a theatrical element to it. I mean, this is everything, from like the great solid production, to the wall of sound that comes in, and it's also the relatively because I know you're a fucking solid guitar player, but it's the sort of the simplicity that you've actually kind of gone for a lot of the parts. I mean, even like on the first track, when the first riff comes in, that's just like the rhythm guitar is only like, it starts on just like it's like a octave, it's like a 2 octaves. It's just one single note, like dong, and then it just like starts from there, and it's just like it's so fucking powerful. But it's it's finding a way to like brush that, even on that lead part, I call it the chorus. I presume you'd probably refer to the same, but in Nigalian, the lead guitar on that is like the that is a powerful part, man. I can only imagine, because earlier when you mentioned this, you said that you had to keep going through things over and over. I could easily imagine, like, when listening to that song, that, oh yeah, if I came up with that lead part, I'd be sat there fucking playing that over and over and over and over, for like hours or like days on end, because it's just, it's such a powerful thing, and that sense of empowerment that you mentioned. I asked you if this comforts you. You said it more empowers you. I can certainly see that on in the music, but especially those kind of parts like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that those kind of leads are really important. I mean, I'm approaching this trying to relay this sense of dread and, this dire darkness. But it's funny because I start doing that and I'll come up with these riffs that are absolutely, horrid. And they naturally break into these moments of triumph. Because like that lead right there, like, of course, we're still relying a lot on dissonance, but then we start to go into majors. And we start to go into melodic riffs. And we only touch upon that, but I think that it's a nice little capstone to those things, and it kind of almost like gets at this idea what I was talking about before of like, in an alchemical sense, the negrito, and if you survive the negrito, it comes out into this, triumphant sense. And so I always want to include these kind of like that lead right there, has this very triumphant feel and maybe less of a panicky, dissonant feel. And having those things have a natural accord, they still feel like they're part of the same entity, and whenever I'm able to do that, that's when I know I've hit the mark, because I'm just like, holy fuck, like I was just doing this nightmare riffs one after another. And the next thing I know, go into this triumphant thing. And that triumphant thing ends up being the pinnacle. It's the capstone of the fucking song. And so, it's a certain dynamic that's just great. And,
I think it's like a really great reward, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is. And then again, you have to get lost in these things. You have to, and it might take a moment, and it's really hard after like months and months of not doing this, and like you could be stumbling for weeks or months and I was trying to find riffs, and like I was panicking about what I talked about before, like how am I going to do this? I'm not going to have a COVID situation again. How am I going to be able to approach this? But like even back then, it was like, it just starts to occur, and these occurrences are like, I don't feel like I'm leading it. Again, it's like I always go back, like to go back to the Greeks, but like, this is the muse. Or we could call it again back to the shadow self. Like once you get lost and you forget about all your surroundings, and you can do that through inspiration in any kind of mode of art.
Yeah.
Even if it's like poetry or whatever it is, you hit this certain flow and you forget about everything else. All of a sudden you're ungrounded again. You're untethered from the earth. And once that happens, all this shit starts happening. And it's like almost like a precognition in a sense, and it just starts coming, and you're just like, holy fuck, and just roll with it, and then once you get some of that, it springboards the rest forward, and
yeah,
I think about like, what if I hadn't that one night that riff in particular, if that same fucking evening I was like, you know what, I'm not feeling it, or I've got to go do this instead, I've got to go get groceries or whatever, it wouldn't even exist. You have to let yourself be as obsessed as possible, to the point of maybe even like daily detriment. Like just the more you can push it, the more you can make that time available, the more you can sacrifice, the better the product's going to be.
I'm so glad that you've actually mentioned that, because that is I mean, that takes a certain degree of discipline as well, right? I think in a way that's essentially what it is about. It's like, because I think, and this can happen to all areas of life. I know that as artists and musicians, a lot of times we're like, oh, I'll wait for inspiration to happen, and to come and get me. But I actually think that it's like any form of spirituality and magic and meditation. It's something that actually gets better the more time, the more repetition, like just like you do reps in the gym, the more repetition you dedicate to it, the more then there is for the gates to be open for something powerful to actually then come through.
Well, and that's where discipline comes in. So people have this mindset of, I'm going to sit around and wait for inspiration to just pick me up, and that can happen, sure. Yeah. That's probably more rare. Discipline is important because it's like, I like the parallel putting it into like the gym of you get in those moments in the gym where you just fucking love it. You have plenty of moments where you hate it and you're like, I have to fucking do this. This is hard. I'm fucking tired. I worked all day. But you end up hitting that fucking moment. You have to force open the door, and it's the same with fucking music. Like I have to sit down and do a bunch of fucking half-ass riffs and be frustrated with myself and go to bed frustrated and, have all this turmoil before the gold will start to appear. And, you have to do that. But to do that, you have to have discipline. And if you don't have discipline, you're never going to get there. You're never going to get there. It's not like, it's same with, like with the gym. It's not like, oh, I just felt so inspired every day and I just got suddenly strong. It's like, no, I had a task before me and it's not an easy task. And sometimes it's not an enjoyable task, with anything. It's like you need to put your face into it and crunch through it, It's, and the more like, the more difficult it is, the better the reward, and that's how I see this with like, something like Melano. It's like that bar is raised so fucking high. Now the mountain's bigger. I got a bigger mountain to climb, and all you can do is like, hey, you know what? The frustration and even like the moments of despair, that's all part of that fucking path. That's a Dante-esque journey through the abyss. It's like you got to do it, and either you will fucking succeed or you will fail.
Couldn't have said it better, man. And actually, on to that subject, I want to ask you this: how does the gym thing help you personally? Maybe find be able to channel the same kind of discipline, maybe into music or into life or into even like dealing with some of the situations that we talked about earlier. Because I gotta commend yourself, man. You know, I mean, I look at maybe some, I think, Nightbringer photos, like I think, yeah, from 2015, I think. I look at those and I look
Yeah.
at you now, and it's just like, it's quite a fucking improvement, man. You know, I mean, your delts have like grown enough to the size of the fucking moon or whatever, you know? So it's like, you've done a fucking really good job, you know? So, how,
Yeah.
you know,
This
how are
this
you
is funny
implementing
because
that into like the whole picture, if you will?
yeah, this is funny because uh, and sorry to disclose this part prematurely, but Nicholas Rombardo, I just did a lengthy interview that'll come out later, but he had the exact same question, but he placed it at
Right.
24.
Right, I see.
He was maybe a little less forgiving than you were. He was like, you were quite chubby. And so yeah, no, I mean, you get to this point and it's like, we can philosophize all day, right? We can think of all these things that we think are great ideas and live in our minds, but action means all. Action is everything. And you know, it
Acta non
was
verba.
kind of hit the same point a little earlier on with the esoteric things. Like, you know, I was so obsessed with all these esoteric writings, but I wasn't fucking doing anything
Sure, yeah.
besides contemplating. I was just contemplating, and there is a power behind contemplation, but you know, and then and so I started to actualize that. And then you get to this other point, especially as you get older. I mean, I'm turning 40 fucking 2, you know, like I'm not a fucking spring chicken. And it's like, you know, these things that I find meaningful, I was like, why am I not doing this? You know, like why, you know, your body is your starting point, you know, and the older you get, the shit just goes downhill naturally, you know, and so I was like, you know what, like I got to do this, you know, I got to do this. And so I started going to the gym. And you know, and it's again, it's like anything else I talked about. When you start going to the gym, it can be very frustrating and very, you know, it's a confusing thing, especially when you're doing it completely on your own.
Is that what you
You
did?
know, yeah, that's what I started off. Actually, initially, I started off with a trainer when I lived in Denver, which was a long fucking time ago. But that only lasted a minute. And then I had friends along the way that were, you know, lifters and shit like that. They gave me advice, but I've been doing this on my own. You know,
Yeah.
I go
Same
to the gym.
here, actually. Yeah, that's good,
Yeah,
man. I can respect that.
yeah, you know what the fuck you're doing when you go in there. And it's funny to realize because, and you just had him on your show, but Darko,
Yeah.
you know, I hooked up with him just because, you know, following him and like, you know, we obviously are very like-minded, and just seeing, you know, he's quite a bit younger than me, and seeing like what that motherfucker has achieved. I'm just like, this guy's on point, you know, and it's like, fuck it, you know, like let's get some fucking feedback here instead of just going alone in the dark. And started doing his regiment. And I mean, I've been working out for years now, but now just in that small amount of time of, I think we're at like coming on 2 months now, something like that, like just a huge difference of having, you know, constant feedback from someone that knows what the fuck is up, you know, checking form. I mean, form is everything. And that's where I was lacking.
Sure.
Because I had no one but myself in the mirror to try and figure these things out, or, you know, a dozen YouTube videos that are all contrary, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
not having diet lockdown, like, you know, but all these things, like, you know, that's all mundane shit, I guess, at the end in the greater scheme. But, you know, having a regiment, the concept of being physically strong, like who can knock that? Like, no, you should be, as a male, you should be physically strong. Having a routine, having a challenge, you know, having a thing every fucking day that you have to fucking live up to, and not even just going into the gym, but even the diet shit. You want to know a fucking challenge, try and stick to a very specific and sparse, as far as options, diet. Then you know about discipline. Then you know about discipline.
100%, man. Like I said to you, I'm about 10, closer to about 11, 12 hours of fasting right now, And part of the reason why I do that, actually, I did it specifically for the podcast and because it was going to be my day off from the gym. Why? Because I have the utmost focus when I'm fasted. But also, besides the fact that I'm currently actually trying to, get closer at least to being shredded, it's a discipline thing. It's to remind myself, not just my mind, but also my body. It's like, hey, motherfucker, this thing that you've got access to might not always be there. So get yourself prepared for it, And I think this is exactly, and that to me is gaining a form of strength. It's intermittent suffering, to me is the way of, that's discipline, right? And through that,
sure.
I think
it's an amount of, it's like an amount of asceticism, like, these self-denials, right? Like, that's good. It's a good practice. And I did that too. I was purposely fasting. The recommendation now in this specific form, not to say that any other form is wrong, is that I don't. And I'm trying to get used to that now. Now what I'm trying to get used to is I'm eating more than I ever have in my fucking life. And I have to like force myself through it. I'm like, God damn it, you got to finish this fucking meal. This is a lot of food, but you see the results, and again, like all these things can reverberate from top to bottom. Like that might seem like such a mundane thing and people can fucking not care or whatever, but fucking, if you are able to physically change your body in dramatic degrees, that means that you have a mindset that is also able to change itself in dramatic degrees. You have that capability and that width, and that discipline, just like we were talking about, that discipline is everything, without it, you just become apathetic.
And you know what? You mentioned the thing earlier that you were into the esoterics, but then you weren't actually doing much and whatnot. I think this is exactly the thing. I think that, at least as a male, I think going to the gym and finding that within yourself, of training, repetition, discipline, all of these things can have a profound effect on your own mind. And like you said, mind is everything, right? I look back at myself from maybe 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, where I was reading intensely, like super into like all the magic stuff, reading all the different books and everything, and obsessed with the Kabbalah and the Klipoth and trying to like get into all of that, and that's great. But what the fuck was I actually doing in terms of life? Like where do we actually find substance in things? It's like I might have been interested in those things, and I might have been like, oh yeah, I'm evil, whatever. But it's like, if I met myself from those years now, I'd be like, you're just a little bitch who's afraid of confrontation,
exactly. And it's a very, it's kind of indoctrinated. It's kind of a code of indoctrination in a Western mindset. This is what you see with like sports fans. So you look at your average sports fan and they can tell you everything about the stats of their favorite sports person, this person that's doing something, and they're sitting on the sidelines eating potato chips and praising this man they wish they would be. And it's like, why not instead of that? Why not instead of this obsession with another celebrity individual? Why not do it yourself? Instead of sitting around and like that's part of your persona is, you're a fan of this or you're a fan of, and it's okay to be a fan. And I'm not saying it's not okay to be a fan of these things, but I'm talking about, especially in America, your average American, this obsession, this absolute obsession with celebrities and sports and all these things. They're just like, instead of being these things themselves that they see value in, which a lot of it's probably very misguided, but to the base of the point, like, why not do these things yourself? Like, why not fucking, instead of, praising whoever the fucking, physically fit person is that's doing these amazing things that you appreciate, why don't you try and mimic it? And even furthermore, don't mimic it, try and push beyond it,
Absolutely,
do it for your fucking self.
Fuck yeah. Listen, I think everyone should aim to find some challenge, something that makes them just be a better person. You know what I mean? Now your goals and stuff. Yeah, of course. This is another way I look at it. Okay, in regards to occult and things like that. But for me, I look at for example, I made the example of Kabbalah. And then obviously there's the opposite of it, with Klipoth. And for me, I look at life and death in the same way, in a more mundane sense, but actually in the sense that it's right there in front of you. Because I look at it like, yeah, you can be obsessed with death, and you can be like, oh wow, what a great thing, or wow, powerful. It is, but what fucking use are you to that if you don't know how to live, if you don't know how to expand life in life and be as much life asserting as you can be? Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, and it should draw you forward. I mean, okay, yeah, all of us. I mean, I grew up in the 90s, so I was fortunate enough in the mid 90s to latch onto black metal, so I was there in the very earlier stages at this point. There was an obsession with darkness and death, and we get all that, right?
Yeah.
That's not something that makes you so unique, if it doesn't propel you forward, if there isn't a constant state of becoming, through that, then it's fucking pointless. Like that's why I never, this whole suicidal black metal thing, like, always seems so pathetic to me, because it's like a weak thing, it's like oh, I'm so sad, I obsess over death and therefore I'm going to kill myself. I'm like, oh, whatever, you're one nameless face in millions and millions of people that were overcome by circumstance. Good fucking job, applause.
Yeah.
And not every suicide ends in that way, and there are people that commit suicides in very glorious ways. That's a different thing. But yeah, anyhow, like, even the obsession with death and darkness, like, you should realize, which you don't at a young age, what you're getting into. You are putting yourself into chaotic forces. I think that anybody I know, any of my good friends from any scenes all over Europe, all over America, that have been dedicated to this for long enough, know that it comes with a fucking price. And that price, I can tell you, is they have friends that have killed themselves. They have friends that have lost themselves to whatever this is, whatever that is. There is death. There is tragedy. This is part and parcel to standing upon this ground, and you have to navigate that. You have to navigate that somehow, and you have to turn it into not a bullshit statement, a teenage statement of fucking, death is cool, into finding actual meaning in there. And that's going to keep changing, and you're going to have to keep fucking walking forward step by step by step through that fucking abyss, and the more that you do, the more resistance you'll have. But the more that you force yourself to do it, the more meaning and gold you're going to pull from it.
For sure. Yeah. It is one of them, it's a path that is unique for each one of us, but like you said, all paths lead to Kali Yuga, right?
They do. And we shouldn't see, on the one hand, it's like, okay, so one of the best books that I've read on Kali Yuga is actually Renee Guénon, which is Crisis of the Modern World. Short read, very, very, very potent read. But the whole idea in the end is like, it's like, basically, we know this is leading. We have the clamor of the mobs. Things are going to increase. Everything turns upside down. Everything loses its meaning until there is conflict to a breaking point that everything's going to break down, right? And it's so strange because like I've told my friends, like I was introduced to these things luckily through my bandmate Brian Ofis from Nightbringer. Very intelligent guy, and very intelligent at a very young age. Like I met him, I think we were like 20 years old, and he introduced me to these things. Like, so like I was in the midst of like what I now call bullshit occultism. You know, it was more like at the time you don't realize, but it's more just adornment for your own personality or your persona, trying to be really evil. Like, you know, like I want to be that evil guy. And then him showing me some real shit, you know, and getting introduced to these things and reading them at a young age was very valuable, even more so valuable at an older age now that I can understand them more. But realizing that it's really bizarre because reading something like that in my 20s, you know, in the early 2000s, and now what's going on now, it's like me and my friends speak about it and we're like, holy fucking shit, like it's here. It's here. We are literally living in exactly what these guys talked about. Like it's not hinted at, it's not like symbolic, it's right there in your fucking face. You know, we are here at the breaking point. This is the fall of Rome, you know, on a mass scale. And it's very sobering, you know, it's very sobering, but that's when you need to latch on to your ideals and, you know, ride the whole fucking thing out. You know, you have to go through the abyss. You have to follow it through, and it's going to get harder and harder and harder. And same with the artistic thing. That's what I'm dealing with now. Like this, like I told you, with like all the cancel culture shit and all the hate we get, this isn't the start of that. This happened years ago. And what has happened over this last week, it's going to increase. It's not going to decrease. There's not going to be a point where everyone's like, oh yeah, these guys are cool. You know?
Yeah.
It's going to increase.
I suppose they're the judge and the jury, you know, and you know, the sentence is already passed, you know, so that
it's done.
down, isn't it?
We're already guilty.
Yeah. Well, you know
guilty
what? Yeah. Well, you know, I'm sure, you know, there's a lot of room for that, I suppose, to be sort of at least looked at from a more open-minded perspective, or at least I hope. But just to sort of round things off here, and I hope this is not too personal of a question. If it is, tell me to fuck off, you know. But you mentioned that everything that you've just mentioned, that obviously the world is come to this place, and you use the word sobering, and I love that. I think that is such a accurate way of describing one's feelings when you actually look at the world now and see what's happening, and everything that you thought is going to go away is actually only just getting worse. I do understand that, and I just wanted to know, as a person, well, how much actually would you say being a father is something that that maybe helps you in this, or perhaps allows you to be a better and stronger person when approaching a situation like this?
Oh, well, yeah, you want to talk about a fucking challenge. You know, being a father these days is a challenge. I mean, I have two sons and two different mothers. And my first son now is about to turn 17, so going into the teen years. And I've had him every single weekend until recently, because now he has a car and a job and a life. And so kind of navigating that, but we're very, very close. And my youngest son, who is 12 years old, I have raised by myself, which, you know, that was a challenge, you know, especially given where I was at that time. You know, 12 years ago, I was a very different person. My sole objective was always my band. Coming with that, you know, anybody that's in a band knows that there's a lot of fucking shit around that, like drinking, drugs, all this kind of shit that you can get lost to, which I did get lost to, especially in my earlier years before I had children involved. And again, we want to emphasize the word sobering, have a child, and then all of a sudden be the person that you're the one and only person in this fucking child's life, you know, and now you get to raise this child. And very interesting, especially in these times, because these times are very confusing and difficult times, raising a 12-year-old. So, you know, obviously me and my youngest son are very, very close, because I raised him. You know, I raised him since he was 2. His mother took off when he was 2 and has never been a part of his life ever since. But that also gave me a chance to have like a very special and very close proximity and relationship with him. So, you know, and it makes you put things into perspective and balance things. And, you know, instead of like, you know, this, you know, we talked about even like the obsession with death and darkness, like that's a part of who I am. And I realize that, and, you know, you have to come to these realizations, but you also have to have the strength to balance those things and to be the master of those things instead of the victim of those things. And especially in order to facilitate a functional household for a child, you know. And these things get difficult to relay, you know. It's like, you know, how do you explain some of these things to your very young child? Like, you know, he mimics me. And as flattering as that is, there's also a huge danger, because as I spoke of before, I have had very ingenious friends, you know, very brilliant minds that were steeped in the same darkness that is a part of my soul, and that just fell to it. They no longer are here. You know, we had a former bandmate kill himself in our fucking practice space. You know, my other bandmate, Albus, you know, we dedicated our 2014 Ego Dominus Tuus album to him, and it's unclear whether he killed himself or if it was an accident, but it didn't fucking matter. The guy was hellbound for fucking death, right? And that's what he achieved. And so it's a very tricky thing when you have a child, because it's like he has a part of my soul in him innately, and I see it, and it's very exciting. But at the same time, I'm like, man, you're gonna have to have. I hope he has the fortitude, because, you know, when you start dealing and obsessing and chasing darkness is what you're going to get.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's like, well, so yeah, it makes you quickly makes you a very dynamic individual. And, you know, his happiness and his well-being is at my forefront at all times.
Sort of puts you at the cusp, I suppose, doesn't it? It puts you at the cusp of things, like right in the middle, and you're the world, right? You know, you're keeping things together for them.
There's you know, he's growing up in very different times, you know, where there's a lot of outside influence, you know, and we have to navigate that, you know, it in a, you know, rational and clear-minded, and gives him the opportunity to make his own choices, but also without that being completely corrupted from the outside. And that's very difficult. You know, at one point, I mean, recently, him coming into this age, him completely emulating his father, you know, that's exciting to a point, but it's also very worrisome.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can appreciate that, you know, and I can appreciate the pressure as well, you know. I mean, I feel like this too sometimes, you know. I don't have children of my own, but I can relate to you in the sense that we follow a path and then everything feels so right to us, and it feels good. But then sometimes, I mean, I can imagine this is probably nowhere near the same amount of intensity. But then, for example, if I reconnect with a relative after years, because you got to think, I've been away from my home since I was a lot younger. You know, I think I was that was maybe just over 10 years ago since I left my home. So whenever I reconnect with like a relative or something, and then I kind of bring them in and I kind of show them, because they ask, they're like, oh, cool, what do you do and stuff, and then I kind of show them a little bit of what I do, and then they actually ask questions. Oh, so what's the line of that song? What's this and that? I'm always a little bit like, oh shit, I'm not sure if I want you to see that, like, and
Oh,
it's like
trust me, yeah. I can only imagine your situation, like, especially I imagine you have family members that are very invested in Islam. That's probably just a guess.
I do, but not many. I'm very lucky in the sense that I actually come from a very open-minded and highly cultured family. I mean, I have a mother who is like, there's no one else like her on the fucking planet. She's she actually came to Bloodstock Festival in England. And she's met guys from bands like Nile and Behemoth, and she's only a metalhead through me. So it's not like she got me into it. I got her into it. And then she's like, okay, this is really fucking cool. And she puts on Watain whilst doing fucking, like hoovering our apartment back in Iran. So it's like, I come from a very unique family, so, but that's like 1 in a fucking 7 billion. So I'm aware of that.
Yeah.
But no, I don't have too many family members that are so much into Islam. It's not even the God thing, it's mostly just the, how you said, like, it's a bit of your soul, it's like that little bit of darkness, and it's like, oh, I don't, it's almost like I want to keep him out of harm's way. Do you know what I'm saying? That's what I'm thinking when I have that kind of reaction to those things.
Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine, with your upbringing, and kudos to you, because coming from a culture like that, must be difficult, especially being into black metal, like talking about the heart of rebellion. Obviously, you have that burning fiercely to be able to come from a society like that and do this. And,
it's somewhere in there, I'm sure.
Years. But, at the same time, it's so funny because, like, when I had a very negative view of Islam, and which is granted because of like you brought up, how the way they treat people, where they treat their women, the kind of regime that's going on, the fanaticism.
I think any person with a common sense would feel that.
With common sense.
But yeah.
Common sense, but we're not living in a world of common sense. You have these people on the left that are cheering on Islam while they're saying contrary ideas, and it's just that's America. It's just this mass confusion. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, these are supposed to be your people, and they're throwing them off roofs, but whatever.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, coming into finding the Sufic tradition, and that was really, again, like eye-opening to me, because I was like, it's so divorced from, I guess, modern Islam, and the tradition itself started in Greece, and through the prosecution of the Christians, it went up through Hellenization from Greece to Egypt, of course, and then when Christianity rose through Roman times, the Sufic idea, which is kind of almost like this nebulous umbrella term, kind of escaped that Christian prosecution and went down into Syria. And so you have figures like Iamblichus. Iamblichus was Syrian, and way later, a Neoplatonist, and he's referencing these ancient Greeks. And so you have in Islam, within the heart of Islam back then, you had this sect that unfortunately basically no longer exists because they were chased out through the modernization of Islam. But you had the Sufis. And man, the Sufism is a beautiful thing, and it's like the more I read about it, the more I'm obsessed with it. And I referenced it at the beginning of this interview. It was one of those things that I discovered. And I discovered it through reading about more like contemporary people that were into Platonism, finding out about the Sufic tradition, which really the Sufic tradition was very much informed by Platonism. And anyone that's interested in that can read like Peter Kingsley, The Dark Places of Wisdom, great book. Again, quick read. But these ideas are perennial. And when I say they're perennial, like you have all these different cultures across the world that are getting at the same thing, right? They're getting at the same thing. It changes by cultural lens in the particulars of the gods. But they kind of come to the same conclusions. And that's because there can only be a singular truth. There can't be two truths. There has to be one, right? And so that's what got me into like the perennial idea. And you see this through Hinduism. You see it through Platonism, especially. But you see it in all these different cultures from Tibet to wherever. And these are the things that really started to pique my interest. But of late, especially with the specificity of dreams and the power of, the imagination on a higher plane, led me to a author named Henry Corbin. Henry Corbin is a Westerner, and he was one of the first that really kind of penetrated the Sufic tradition. And his writings are just fucking absolutely amazing. And on another note, you have there are Sufis that were prosecuted by Islam, that were Muslims. Al-Hallaj, I think, is probably the most prominent. And I believe he was martyred, but they have this idea of Iblis, right? And so he had this idea of Iblis as being just as important as Allah. And it's almost now in the context of Judas being just as important as Jesus.
That's right, yeah.
Whereas Judas was required to be the martyr, and Jesus asked him, "You must be the martyr. You must be the other end. You must be the darkness where I am the light." And so that was kind of a Hallaj view of Iblis, as the father of all jinn in the desert. And you see these parallels obviously between the Genesis and the Iblis not bowing down. And but this take on it was almost like I will worship Allah in the temple by day, and then at night I will go to the desert and worship Iblis. And I love that concept. And you find the same concept, this one hand in heaven, the other in hell. You are Hermes Trismegistus. You are traveling between all three worlds, from the celestial to the abyss. And you find the
as
same
above,
concept.
so below.
Exactly. Yeah. Agrippa. And you find the same concept, especially expressed through another very important figure to us, is Andrew Chumbley. And his iteration of what he would call witchcraft, a term I don't like these days because it's been so fucking hijacked. But
Sure.
Andrew Chumbley, same kind of thing, is this kind of holistic view from the Imperium to the abyss, and every way between, being a master of all, having one hand above, one hand below. But yeah, and of course he's more modern. He's dead now, but he's more modern. But his take on witchcraft I think is highly significant. Genius author. But you can find it in earlier stuff, and lately that's been my obsession, especially with Henry Corbin, Man of Light. Great fucking book. But yeah, it's something that anyone interested in things to check out. And then again, I mentioned before, David Hyam-Smith, 36 Keys, absolutely amazing stuff.
Yeah. What was the name of the book again?
36 Keys. He has a new one now, actually, Black Ether. And I believe Anathema Publishing put that one out.
I know Anathema Publishing, actually. Yeah, I've followed some of the
Yeah.
stuff that they've put out before. It's very good stuff. Well, yeah, I appreciate the suggestions, man. You know, I think that's some like fucking great stuff. Honestly, I think that anyone who's listened to this podcast, you know, who is on any level fan of either black metal or the occult, or just trying to actually understand life and reality, will have had a fucking blast at this one, I think. You know, so I really do want to thank you for jumping on and taking your time, man. Fucking appreciate that very much.
Fuck yeah, man. This was very enjoyable. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, before I go off as well, I'd like to give a moment if you want to just go through your schedule with Akhlys. I believe that's sort of like the forefront of things at the moment. So I know you got a tour coming up with Migwa in September, correct?
Yeah, it's not quite a tour. We've got 2 dates in California and then Las Vegas. Fortunately, those are the ones that are kind of under attack. So it's we'll see how everything pans out. But really looking forward to that. Migwa is a band that I respect immensely.
Yeah.
So it's great to have the opportunity, and also, you know, ones that have also come under the same kind of scrutinies. So it'll be good. I like, you know, it's almost a statement. So I'm looking forward to those. We haven't played the US in a very long, well, before, actually, that's not true. We just played 2 shows, but before that, we hadn't played the US in fucking forever. But yeah, looking forward to that. And then we have a European tour coming up in September with our brothers in Fides and Versa and Chaos Invocation, which that I am probably the most stoked for. So, and then after that,
it's one hell of a fucking lineup, man.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And get to reconnect with old friends and friends I've met over the internet. And those guys have been such huge supporters. And, you know, I'm a big fan of both those bands. And in July, we get to go back. I get to go back. It'll be my first time for the rest of my bandmates, but get to go back to Norway. And, you know, Norway is a special place for me. And I've got a lot of friends there, and like, especially the Nidrosian scene, like,
of course.
Yeah, that would be cool to get to go back to Norway and get to do that. And, you know, so yeah, we're really looking forward to all these things coming up. Most immediately is Maryland Death Fest, which apparently is the last iteration of that. So yeah,
I am fucking heartbroken about that, man. You know, it was my dream to play that festival one day, you know, and we didn't get big enough in time. I'm really fucking gutted that that's actually their last one.
Hey, you guys are on the right track, man. I've listened to your stuff and it's fucking killer. So like, you guys are on the right track. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Cool, brother. I very much appreciate that, man, especially coming from yourself. That's fucking killer. And hopefully we'll see you in London in September too, right?
Oh, yeah, that's Cosmic Void. That should be a hell of a show. So,
fucking excellent. Well, Kyle, I very much appreciate you, brother. Thank you for jumping on. And to everyone else listening to the podcast, thank you very much. If you've made it this far, be sure to fucking, if you've not listened to Akhlys's last record, then go and fucking do it. If you've not listened to the one before, go and fucking do that too, you know. And obviously, you know, be sure to support Akhlys on the upcoming shows. And I thank you all very much for listening to this episode of Iblis Manifestations. And I'll see you all on the next one.